Hello, this is Jeff McCarty and Nathan Swain. We will be discussing our web map application project for the Programming in GIS class at Brigham Young University entitled Book of Mormon in North America. Okay, we decided to start off by showing you our website and then we'll get into the code after that. If you notice, our website is divided into three sections: the event selector along the left here, the timeline along the top, and the map in the middle here. The event selector is a pretty dynamic part of our website. It includes a list of all the events with a title, short description, an approximate date of the event, and a scripture reference which links to lds.org, showing you the scripture that talks about the event. The event selector is in this accordion style, so as you select an event, it changes what event information is displayed. If you notice, it also dynamically adjusts the map as well as the timeline. It should adjust the map to zoom to the extents of that particular event that is selected and displays only the layers for that event, and the timeline adjusts to show the approximate date that event took place. So the next part is the timeline, which is similar to the event selector in that as you select a time, it will dynamically change the event displayed as well as the zoom that it shows, and also adjust the event selector on the left to show the correct event that's associated with that time. The timeline is just this really cool animation that we found reference to online. We can go to that. We reference that in our credits, but here is what we found online. It was done at this csslab.cl, and it was done under the MIT license, so we could use it for our application. But similarly, as you change events, you can see that the timeline adjusts for that as well. And if you click on the timeline, it will change what event is shown. So we thought it was a great incorporation for our application. The map, apart from changing dynamically with the event selector and the timeline, it also includes information associated with each of the layers in the form of pop-ups. So as you select a specific icon or layer, it will show you information about that layer. So here's the name of the city that I just selected. Some of them include images, some of them don't. A short description, date, scripture reference, and similarly, this reference links to lds.org for that scripture. Also, the image links to lds.org to show you where we got the image. So that is true of all the different layers. You can just select whichever ones you want and close them as needed. Now to finish up, down here we have our credits, which is where we got what we referenced a lot for our information. This first one is where we got the speculated event locations for this. That's from this first reference here. The other three are related to different parts of our website and JavaScript. The last thing to show you back at our website is this help file button. When you click the button, the help file will pop up, giving you information, giving the user information that they need.
Okay, now that you've seen the website, we'll go ahead and show you what's under the hood. We'll start with the HTML file. So, just to show you a few of the resources that we use, we import the OpenLayers script that we have on our website. We also have the timeline CSS that does the styling for the timeline tool that we use. There's jQuery UI, CSS, that styles the accordion feature. That's a jQuery UI thing. And also we have our own CSS to do a few simple styling things. We also, the timeline uses jQuery, so we had to include that. And we use jQuery UI. Here's the JavaScript for jQuery UI. And then the JavaScript for our timeline. And then of course the JavaScript file that we wrote. So a lot of these are just things that we had to copy into our website and be sure they were included. The ones that we made are this one and this one. So notice there's an onload event. It calls the init function. We'll talk about that when we get to the JavaScript. But the HTML is split into a few sections. You see here the timeline that is inside of a header div. Okay, and the timeline is basically just a list where each date is one of the elements of the list, and it's a link as well. So that's kind of, I guess, the structure behind it. The JavaScript handles all the events for when you click on those in the timeline. Okay, here's our help button. Okay, and then we've divided the content into two sections, layers and then the map. In the layers, we have our accordion. And you can see it's just a bunch of divs and paragraphs nested inside of each other. This is our first event, name, and then the content, the description of it, the date, and the link to the scriptures. And then here's our second one, and so on. So that's the accordion. Then the map we put in this map wrapper div. Okay, and this is what OpenLayers uses to put all of its stuff in. Finally, we have a footer where you see all of the copyright and credit information. Okay, now that you've seen the HTML, we'll go through our JavaScript file, bommap.js. Okay, the first thing we do in this file is we define a couple overall global variables. One is just our API key for Bing. We use a Bing map in the background. The other is our map variable. Almost all of the processing with JavaScript is done in the init function that's initialized on the onload event with the body. First thing we do is we define a couple of variables we're going to work with, event list and selector. We define a function that we use called select current layer. Okay, and what this does is when you click on the accordion, it calls this function and selects the current layer. To do so, it defines a selector first for that layer. Notice that it uses the event list, and then adds the selector to the map. There's a for loop that turns off all of the layers, and then we just turn on the current one. We get the extent of the current layer, and we zoom to that extent and zoom out once just so it frames it nicely, and then we select the corresponding time on the timeline. So that's a function we use a little later on. The main statements in the init function are these. We have the map defined with all the controls that Jeff talked about. Then we define our Bing map using our API key, and we add that to the map using the add layer method. We set the center and use fractional zoom to give us a nicer zoom than the default. Alright, and then this next section we define an object for each of our events using the vector object in OpenLayers. Okay. We define event listeners so that when you click on the different objects on the map, it responds to that and generates the pop-up. We have two cases for the pop-up, and they have to do with whether there's a picture or not included. The pop-ups are populated from attributes that you find in the KML file. One of them is the name that's off the screen here, the description, the date, the scripture link, the reference, and if there's a picture, it also throws the picture in there. And this is just the HTML that's generated in that pop-up. Okay, we create the pop-up, add it to the map, and then this is for when we unselect events, what it does. Removes the pop-up, destroys it, etc. All the other event objects are similar, so we'll spare you the details there. And we'll come down to the next section. Okay, after all our events are defined, we add them to this event list. We add all of the events, or those event layers, to the map. And then this next section defines the initial state that you see when you first come to the website. We turn off all the layers except for the first one, which has an ID of 0. Then we define the selector for that event, the first event. We add that to the map. We bind our accordion click event, or our accordion change event, to the select layer function that we talked about above, so that when you click on the accordion, it calls this function and selects the layer. And that's the end of our init function. We've got a couple other functions here. Notice here we've got one that initializes the accordion. This is just part of jQuery UI. And then this last one defines a function called ActEvent that accepts a parameter called index. And what it does is when you select something on the timeline, it selects the corresponding event on the accordion. If we go back to our HTML, here's our timeline, and it calls this event, ActEvent, for this function, and passes in the ID that corresponds with the ID in the accordion. So that's how the accordion and the timeline are linked, through this function and through the select current layer function. That is our JavaScript.
Okay, here we are in an example KML we have. This will be a similar format for each of our 16 events. Our KML, we produced each of the events in ArcGIS, using ArcGIS, which we then export to KML, and it gave us a KML file for each of them. We edited it slightly. Each one came with each feature layer separated out, so each point, line, or polygon in a different feature layer folder is what it says here. And we slightly edited this to and this is what we reference for our pop-ups. So we have the different information: name, description, date, reference, scriptural link, and picture information. Down here, we'll jump down here where we have an actual picture reference, which is a little difficult to interpret, I guess, but first we have this link to les.org, which is where we reference the picture. Then down towards the end of this line, we have the actual source of the image that is shown, which is a copy of that referenced picture from lds.org. So apart from that, each point, line, or polygon is separated out into a different feature, and then we have the styles related to each of those colors. With points have different icon images and scales. And that is how our KMLs are referenced.
Okay, that has been our presentation. Jeff and I want to thank you for listening and hope you had lots of popcorn and treats while you were watching. If you'd like to visit our website, please go to www.platinumhawk.com/bommap.